Hello and welcome to Padre's Corner. I'm Father Robert Balaser, the digital Jesuit, PadreSJ in the Twit TV chat room, and this is the show that's about, well, pretty much anything we want it to be about. You see, we wanted a forum, a little bit of time where we could take some of the stories from the week, some of the interesting anecdotes that we hear from the people in the chat room, and just bring something for you, the good geeks and gals, the men and women, all the dorks that make up the Twit Army. By the way, I'm one of the biggest dorks of them all. So for the next hour or so, we're going to bring you some of the stories that may have slipped through the cracks. We're going to bring you some of the stuff that I find interesting, and there might just be a rant or two. Till then, I think let's get on to the freaking lasers. Yeah, that's right. Who doesn't like freaking lasers? We got a story here about Israel jets. That's right. Israeli jets are going to be equipped with lasers starting this year. Now, this started back in 2002. You may remember there was a story about a jet in Kenya, an Israeli airliner, that they tried to shoot down. Some terrorists tried to shoot down with some shoulder-launched missiles. Well, Ariel Sharon, who was the prime minister back then, demanded that something be done, and this is the result. This pod that you see here is the Sky Shield. It's military tech that has been adopted for civilian use. The Sky Shield combines infrared sensors, a thermal camera, and a laser system. Now, the idea is if the sensors detect a launch, so that the heat plume from a launch, the camera will automatically slew over to that area, will locate the missile, and then the lasers will actually start to fire at the sensor of the missile. It will basically misguide it. It will burn out the infrared sensor. It will make it impossible for it to find out exactly where the plane is, and hopefully the missiles will veer off course. Now, one of the things that people have worried about this is that this seems to be like the militarization of passenger airlines. But in places where shoulder-fired missiles are becoming far, far cheaper, far more abundant, and far more capable, I think this is actually a trend. We're going to see more and more airlines, more and more countries that start to demand that there maybe aren't lasers, but at least some sort of countermeasures so that as you fly into these hostile areas, you have a way to protect your aircraft. Go figure. All I know is it's probably going to add to the price of a ticket. Our second story is all about Incognito country mode. Yeah, for the longest time, you've had the ability to turn your browser into incognito mode, essentially turning off all the cookies, making it very difficult for a standard website to track you. I mean, of course, there are still ways to track you, but now Google is talking about turning on incognito mode for all of China. Now, we've known that the Great Firewall of China has been intercepting traffic forever. The idea is that they have not just computers, but a lot of people who are looking at real-time searches, who are looking at real-time DNS queries, who are looking at the actual traffic flowing over the country's network, and then doing real-time censoring. Well, what Google has decided to do is to implement end-to-end encryption. Now, any of you non-IT geeks out there know that end-to-end encryption is that security feature that means that from the computer, from the user's computer to the data center, the data stream is encrypted. It's very difficult to intercept. In fact, it's almost impossible unless you're specifically targeting an IP, an individual, and decrypting his stream in real time. Now, the other thing is, remember back when Google got upset because China had been spying on it, they moved all of their servers off of mainland China, which means that China can't just go into the Google data center with a warrant or without a warrant and grab the servers. This could be a good thing, but you have to remember this is tempered by the fact that not a whole lot of people in China actually use Google. They use their own homegrown search engine, Baidu. So this is kind of a Pyrrhic victory. Good for Google. We'd like to hear stuff about this, but I don't know how much of an effect it's actually going to have on the Chinese government. We'll see. Now, let's have a little bit of a mini meltdown rant. Y'all know about Carl Icahn, right? Icahn is he's an interesting businessman. I mean, I don't want to demonize the person. He's making a buck, and he's making it the best way that he knows how, which is by leveraging his wealth to buy companies, buy stakes in companies, and then make those companies do what he wants them to do in order to make more money. It could be portrayed as evil, but I'm not going to say it's evil. I'm just going to say it's indicatory of the system in which we live. So Carl Icahn just went after eBay. What he wanted them to do is he wanted eBay to spin off PayPal. PayPal is actually a very profitable division of eBay, and he thought, now that he has taken a 2% stake in eBay, that in spinning off PayPal, they would have the ability to make a lot of money. And, you know, again, who doesn't like money? Here's the thing, though. Along with spinning off PayPal, he wanted eBay to accept his 2 nominees for the board. He wanted 2 seats, which would give him more power in what eBay actually does. Now, that might sound reasonable to someone to say, hey, well, if he owns part of the company, then he should have seats. But consider this. There are 10 seats on the eBay board. Carl Icahn owns 2% of the stock. He wanted 20% of the seats. Maybe it's just me, but that math doesn't quite add up right. Now, here's the thing, though. Carl is used to getting what he wants. He gets it all the time. He is such a big player. He has so much money. He has so much influence that if you don't play ball by his rules, he has the power to make things incredibly difficult for you to do business. We saw this with Yahoo. We've seen it with Apple. We've seen it with companies like Lionsgate and Dell. Now, let me divorce it a little bit from Carl because, I don't want to demonize the man. I don't want people to start thinking, oh, it's just Carl. Carl is a bad man. Carl is the worst of the corporate raiders. Carl is just very skilled in something that we talked about on Padre's Corner not too long ago. You may remember we talked about the leveraged buyout. Now, a quick refresher course for those people who don't remember. A leveraged buyout is what you do when you want to buy a company. You want to buy the controlling stake, but you don't want to use your own capital. You don't want to waste your own resources. You don't want to risk the money that you have in the bank. So even though I may have $1 billion, I'm going to say I want to buy, eBay, but I don't want to pay any of my money. So I'm going to go to the bank, and I'm going to say, partner with me. Give me the money that I need to buy a controlling interest, 51% of the stock, so I can put my own board members on the company's board. And in return, I will use for collateral what that company is worth. I will use the assets of eBay to secure the loan that I will use to buy eBay. Okay, right there, that sounds weird, but perfectly legal. You actually can do that. But now here comes the fun. Once I own the controlling interest of the company, because remember, I don't have to own the whole company. I just have to be able to determine what it's going to do. And if I own 51% of the voting shares, I can. Now that I own that controlling interest, I can put my own board members into play, which means I can now control the decisions, which means to a company like eBay, I could go ahead and spin off PayPal, even though it's a horrible decision for the company. The reason why I would do that is because it makes me quick cash, which I can turn around and give back to the bank to settle my debts, and then I can start parting out eBay. I can sell off this division and this intellectual property and that technology and this campus and that property until I've made back millions, hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of dollars without risking a single cent of my own personal property. Again, this is all legal. There is nothing wrong with this according to the system in which we live, but it makes me question if maybe the system in which we live needs a little bit of fixing. Carl Icahn, I'm sure you're a good person. I'm sure you're a good businessman, but when I see what you do to Dell, when I see what you tried to do to Apple, when I see what you are doing to eBay, it makes me wonder if we should trust any company that you've invested money in. Maybe Carl is the poison pill. Now, when we come back, I want to do some freaking science. It's been a while since I've had a chance to just really geek out over some technology. So we're going to be talking nukes. But until then, have you ever wondered what an Instakill looks like?
Hey, it's me, Mario.
Folks, that was our friends over at CorridorDigital again. We are going to be lucky enough to have CorridorDigital on a future episode of Padre's Corner. If you don't remember, the guys at CorridorDigital showed the world what was possible with just your home desktop, some decent software, Adobe After Effects, and a good idea for telling stories. Now, I know there's some people in the chat room who are saying, "Oh, well, that was way too violent." I get that. I understand that. That's cool. I get where you're going. But remember that was actually just all the videos that we might remember, all the video games that we remember from our time playing video games back in the 80s. And in the 80s, there was always a way to do an insta-kill. Now, I suggest you go over to CorridorDigital, drop by their YouTube page at youtube.com/CorridorDigital, or drop over to their Twitter page where you could follow them. They do some incredible work, including some upcoming feature projects. It's all part of the goodness that is YouTube. And again, hopefully we're having Nico and Sam on a future episode of Padre's Corner. Now let's get to it, folks. We've got some freaking science. Over the weekend, I watched a documentary called Pandora's Promise. It was a movie that kept showing up in my Netflix queue, and I really didn't know if I wanted to watch it. But since I am kind of an aficionado of all things technology and power generation, I watched it. See, Pandora's Promise is all about the nuclear debate. Is it safe? Is it not safe? Is it something that we should be developing? Is it something that we should bury? Now, I think it actually took a really balanced view of the pros and the cons, why we're afraid of nuclear power. It looked at things like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and Fukushima, and it showed what happens when we think we know what we're doing, but we actually don't. But in the end, Pandora's Promise showed us that, look, there's not a whole lot of options right now. Alternative energy is great, but if you look at the graphs, if you look at how much power we're consuming and the growth of our power consumption, we're never going to be able to meet that with just alternative energies, with just solar and wind and hydro. You're going to need to either burn more fossil fuels or you're going to need to look for an alternative, at least until some better technology works out. Now, right now, most of our nuclear reactors are using what's called LWR. It's a light water reactor. It's a certain type of technology that became popular in the United States because it was the tech that we used in our naval vessels. So when the military was developing technology, they thought, well, people should be using the technology that we use on our carriers, on our submarines, and that was going to be LWR. Now, LWR, quite simply, is a way of doing nuclear power with regular water. You don't have to use heavy water. You don't have to use graphite. Water acts as both the coolant and the neutron moderator. Now, this is important because in a nuclear reaction, believe it or not, you have to slow down the neutrons. Now, we all know how a nuclear reaction works, right? It's high school physics. When you split an atom of uranium or plutonium, you're going to get heat, energy, and you're also going to get more neutrons. These neutrons will shoot out and hopefully collide with other atoms of that element. When it does that, you get what's called the chain reaction, which gives you a sustainable nuclear reaction. Well, in some reactors, and specifically I'm talking about the Chernobyl reactor, the moderator was graphite. It was not water, which meant when the reactor started to run dry, the reaction actually increased. It went out of control. The Chernobyl was built on what's called a positive void coefficient, which means as you lose water, you start to speed up the reaction. LWR reactors, because they don't use graphite as a moderator, they don't use graphite as a way to slow down the neutrons to increase the chance of creating more reactions. As you have a void coefficient, it actually slows down the reaction. It's a far safer process. But what Pandora's Promise showed was that there's actually reactor technologies out there, 3rd and 4th gen reactor technologies that are far safer even than LWR. These are reactor technologies that allow you to completely remove cooling, to shut everything down, and the reactor would reach a critical point of temperature and then turn itself off. If that kind of design had been in use at Fukushima, we wouldn't have had the 3 meltdowns of their 3 reactors. Now, here's a fun fact about nuclear reactors, and that is that when you split an atom of uranium-235, it releases energy in the form of heat and 2 lighter elements, krypton and barium, and 3 free neutrons. These free neutrons can then be absorbed by additional uranium-235 atoms to continue the reaction. But like, as I said, you do need that moderator. That means that if you boil away the water, the neutrons aren't slowed, which will in turn decrease the rate of fission, poison the chain reaction. That's all the stuff I just explained to you. But the amount of energy contained in nuclear fuel is about 1,000,000 times more than the amount contained in chemical fuel. But we all know that there's a price, right? I mean, we all know that there's a price of using nuclear power. And that price is that we have a lot of byproducts. Light water reactors need uranium-235 or plutonium-239. That means that you need to enrich fertile, that's not quite reactive fuel, most likely it's going to be uranium-238, you have to enrich that into fissile material. And that program generates tons of waste. In fact, when we talk about nuclear waste in this country, most of it is not generated from the nuclear reactors. The spent fuel rods are actually, if you were to combine all the spent fuel rods from all around the world, from all the nuclear reactors, from every country that has ever been running, ever, it would fill a football field. So 100 yards by, what is that, 10 yards, 20 yards? I can't even remember what it is. About 30 feet deep. That's not a lot considering how much power has been generated. Where the waste comes from is from everything that you need to do to process the fuel. And that is actually a very dirty process. You see, in order to enrich them, we need to run them through centrifuges. We need to separate the elements. We need to give you a pure type of uranium-239 or plutonium-239, 235 or plutonium-239, which means that I'm going to be making a lot of things dirty, radioactive. Yeah, and as Tensor Guy says, oh, because of the krypton gas, yeah, you're going to have a poison reaction. You need to remove that. It's a very expensive process. It's a very lengthy process, and it's a very dirty process. Well, there's a technology out there, and I've been researching this for about a decade. It looks very promising. It's technically hard to do, but if we could get it perfected, and that means if we could actually invest money in nuclear reactors again, because we haven't for 30 years, but if we could, it could change the face of energy. It's called a traveling wave reactor. Now, a traveling wave reactor is different than a light water reactor or even a heavy metal reactor because it uses fertile fuel, not fissile fuel. In other words, it becomes its own enrichment plant. All those tons of nuclear waste that we have to deal with, we don't actually really have to deal with a traveling wave reactor because a traveling wave reactor is a breeder as well as a reactor. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me explain it to you. You see, in a traveling wave reactor, as you can see at the graphic here from Wikipedia, you only need a very small amount of enriched material, about 10% of your enriched uranium-235. That's the core of the reactor. That actually kicks off the reaction. Now, the fissile core is surrounded by rods of uranium-238, and everything is bathed in liquid sodium. As the fissile core starts to react, the free neutrons released are absorbed by the fertile fuel that surrounds the fission zone. As you can see in this graphic, the fission zone just slowly grows out. The depleted zone is in the middle. It's dark blue. It's filled with fission products and leftover fuel. Then you have the fission zone, which is the green zone. It's active fission that's actually generating the heat and the neutrons. Then you've got the breeding zone, which is where the neutrons are being absorbed and uranium-235 is being turned, uranium-238 is being turned into uranium-235. Then you have the fresh zone, which is unreacted fuel. What this lets us do is it lets us take a pile, a nuclear pile, all the fuel that we need to make the breeder reactor work, the traveling wave reactor function, and we lock it away for like 10 years. You never have to touch it, ever. And the best part about it is if it loses cooling, if it starts to heat up, it will actually slow the reaction down. It's a self-moderating reaction. You don't have to worry about water. You don't have to worry about cooling. You don't even have to worry about containment because everything is within one area. You're never going to have to refuel this thing. After the 10 years are done and you've run through the fuel, here's the best part. Everything stays on site. I don't have to take the fuel and dump it into an empty mountain in Arizona or Nevada. I don't have to take it out and reprocess it where it's going to require the contamination of tons of gear. All you have to do to restart a breeder reactor is melt it. Just melt the core, reformat it, put a fresh stack of uranium-235 in the middle, and it's good to go. Now, this technology has been on the drawing board for a long, long time, but we haven't used it because we've been so freaked out about nuclear power. And that's the sad thing, because if we had been putting development money into nuclear power, well, we could have avoided things like Fukushima. We could have avoided things like 3 Mile Island. We could have reduced our dependency on foreign oil. Now, but before we get to all the conspiracy theory stuff, I do want to say that back in the 60s and the 70s, when there was all this fervor about how nuclear was bad, I bought into it. I was a big anti-nuclear geek, and I looked at the technology, and I didn't see any real way for it to become safe. But as I've grown, and as I've learned, and as I've looked at the technology, I've realized that, yeah, not only is it good for us, but it's absolutely important that we develop something like this. It's also, there's a part of me that looks at all the obstruction to this and realizes that some of the major opponents of the nuclear movement have been supported by the oil industry. Now, that in itself isn't proof that there's any sort of conspiracy, but it does tell me that, yeah, they see this as a direct competitor. If we could somehow get nuclear, like France, which has 80% of their power from nuclear, we could become an energy-independent country, and that's a good thing. Now, let me run a few more things down for all you eco-warriors. You got to remember that France has 80% of their power from nuclear fuel. They have the cheapest energy in Europe. They have the cleanest energy in Europe. In fact, they generate less carbon dioxide than Denmark. They generate 5 tons of carbon dioxide per year per capita. By comparison, Germany generates 10 tons of carbon dioxide per year per capita. Now, the United States bought 1,600 nuclear warheads from Ukraine and Russia not too long ago, and they turned them into fuel for uranium, for nuclear reactors. This is the sort of program that could actually take weapons that were designed to destroy and instead turn them into fuel to power the next generation. All right, that's the end of my rant. I hope you've listened to me. I hope I haven't come off too crazy, but this is something that I really feel about. I feel that we should be paying attention to nuclear power, and I'm hoping that you're willing to listen. Now, this is the time of the show where I go ahead and I introduce our guest, who is actually an old friend of mine. He's a good man. He does a lot of stuff that I don't understand, which is why I want to have him on the show. Let me introduce to you Mr. Joe Policino. I can never say your last name. Policino. Can I just call you Joe?
You've got 2 choices, Policino or Policino, as the Americans say it.
How about this? Can I just call you AKA Trent?
Sure.
Okay, because that's how I know you as. I think the first time that we ever met was on Twitter, was it not?
We met on YouTube.
That's right. We met on YouTube.
Wait.
You commented on one of my videos, and you're like, "Hey, I graduated from a Jesuit school," and we got to talking. We met in person at CES a few years back, and it's been actually I think that was the last time we had a face-to-face meeting.
Yeah, we both kind of came up in our own respective ways. You ended up at Twitter, I ended up at Engadget for a while, and yeah, it's been we've known each other since before everything kind of took off. I'm not at Engadget anymore, but
right.
It was a fun ride.
Now, Joe, I know that you're a geek. You're a geek's geek, and you had some of the best reviews on YouTube. Your style was always so fluid, and you were really, really good at what you did. But you've moved on. You've got a new gig. Can you tell me a little bit about Very Rare Magazine?
So Very Rare Magazine is a little YouTube project I've been working on for about a year with my buddy Arbin, and we're basically doing our own little take on covering menswear, specifically what they call streetwear and sneakers. So that's kind of one of the up-and-coming areas for coverage I've sort of seen. I've always been kind of a sneaker collector, very into men's fashion, and it's something that's definitely becoming more of a thing now, and I sort of looked at it and went, this is kind of similar to where tech blogs were when I started making my gaming headset reviews, so why not move it along to this now that I'm kind of moving away from the tech stuff? Still doing tech, though, in a way, so.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. You say that, it reminds you a lot of the blogging scene when it first came out. It was all focused on tech. And back then, there were a lot of people who were saying, I don't understand this. Why are they doing this? What are they doing? Should I be paying attention to this? I think you've got the very same market in the very same time where people are looking at what you're doing with Very Rare. And I see your tweets all the time, and I see how much you enjoy fashion, you enjoy street fashion, you enjoy sneakers, you enjoy men's clothing. And it, you know, as much as I don't understand it, because I am a slob and I have no fashion sense whatsoever, and people look at me and go, oh, yeah, okay. I love it because of the passion that you have for your stories. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got there? So let's start at the point that we met. You were making videos on YouTube. You were reviewing technology, and then after I talked to you, you told me that, oh, I might be getting a job at Engadget. Go from there.
So I was reviewing gaming headsets. I need to shout out Jeff Stegner, MLG Steggy, and Chillafrilla. I'm sure a few of you might be familiar with Chillafrilla because at a time he was one of the top YouTubers, and also John Furlakers, who's now at Techno Buffalo. He's another person I've been talking to since I came up. So I really just was reading reviews, and I saw that when I would get headsets, I was mainly into like gaming gear, mainly headsets though, because I was playing in bands at the time and I was kind of familiar with sound. The reviews just didn't seem to answer the questions I always had, and I saw that a few other people were reviewing them. So I said, well, maybe that's what I'll do on YouTube. So I devised my plan. When I got my PS3, I unboxed it. And from there, it was mildly successful, and I was able to go on and do that. So did that for a little bit while I was playing in bands and sort of doing college. And then along the way, I decided to take a year off of college, decided, let me try the YouTube because that's doing okay. I'm starting to make some press contacts with the auto companies. Let me try the band thing because that's also doing kind of good. We've got some gear endorsements from companies, and we're getting some decent shows here and there. Went to do both for a little bit. And then I decided that the band wasn't doing as well as I wanted it to. Some days we would play a really big show with big acts at big venues, but then other days it wouldn't be. So I decided to end that in about the end of 2011, played a show with the Goo Goo Dolls and just called it there because I figured that was a good ending note for me. I was satisfied. Went for about 5 or 6 more months on my own at YouTube, and Engadget had a call to hire. I sent out my resume. A few months later, I heard back, and so that was a lapse from December, and then by about May, June, I was at Engadget. Darren Murph had responded to me. He was the old managing editor. He's no longer there anymore, but he currently does sort of feature pieces at Boy Genius Report. So ended up at Engadget, was doing some audio coverage there. If you look back, I did a massive amount of articles. I was just a normal associate editor, but the whole time I was there, I really loved all the people there. It got very stressful for me after a while. The grind is very heavy when you're a tech blogger. You have to eat. You can't devote any time to anything else, and it was definitely super stressful for me after a while with some other things.
Let's talk about that. Actually, I want to talk about the grind because I've heard about that. You know, typically when you look at sites like The Verge and Engadget, they are flocked to by geeks like you and me who think, oh my gosh, a job talking about tech. This is like my dream job. I'm gonna love this. Of course, I'm gonna want to work. And then, as you said, after a while, it does start to grind when you realize this thing that you used to love, now it's your job. And it's not, oh, I'm going to look at that and maybe I'll like it, maybe I'll write a story. It's, no, you write 5 stories a day and you never stop.
It's just one of those jobs where you have to do a million things at once. You never really get to stop what you're doing. If you love it, you will love it. And I loved it. But for me, I found that after a while, I wasn't really hitting the kind of stories that I wanted to hit. And that sort of became a drain because it started feeling a lot. There was always a mixture of work and fun for me, but there was a point where it started feeling more like work than anything else. And I was not sort of liking what I was doing. And I was more doing it because it was my job. And I kind of could feel that I was starting to like drift away. And I started editing the podcast for a bit and trying to do other things. The podcast editing was great. I really enjoyed doing that. But I started realizing I was definitely more of a video and audio guy, and that wasn't sort of happening for me at Engadget. So I love writing, but for me, I'm more on that audio visual side. So eventually ended up parting ways with them, and it was amicable. It was fine, but now I'm doing this, and so I'm still going to do tech. I'm actually going to be doing headphone reviews. I'm still involved with that. I'm actually working with a set of Soul Republic headphones right now, but there's going to be a little bit more of the lifestyle angle to it. I guess Engadget was great for me. It was my dream job. If anyone asked me, I loved it there. It was just that I wasn't exactly doing what I thought I would be doing if I ever made it to Engadget. And so after doing that for a bit, you can only go so long before you end up burning yourself out. But I think if you're looking to become an aspiring tech blogger, it's a great job. I was into it. I'm still super into it. Just sometimes your passions change when you least expect them to.
But at least you get the exposure. At least you see how the industry works. Now, I want to ask you this because I've watched a lot of your videos. I haven't understood most of them because, again, I'm not part of that scene. But what I love about them is you have a certain style. Some of your stuff is incredibly artistic. You did this shot where you were like on a street corner and you were just, it looked so, there was nothing happening except showing off fashion, and yet it felt really, I don't know. Here, let's look at some of your videos. What is this? Describe to me what you're doing right now. You got some Supreme thing?
Yeah, so Supreme is effectively, if we're talking streetwear, they're like the leaders in streetwear. It's a skate shop in New York. They're known for having a really bad attitude, but staying true to their roots. The stuff sells out as soon as it releases. It's very hard to get, very limited, but they are, in terms of streetwear, this is the company. They've been around since '94, so it's easy for us to sort of talk about them when you're talking about any brand. You see it a lot, especially down in New York. And right now, basically what I'm doing here is these stores, a lot of people, this is stuff that you have to get it from the store. You might not be in New York City. So I have glass, and I've been sort of devising some glass content based on more of the social aspect and based more on this streetwear thing in menswear, because I'm not really seeing it there. And I figured, well, that melds me, like geek and menswear, fashion, whatever. But I wonder if I just walked around and brought people shopping with me. And I mean, it seems really silly to me. I actually think it's one of my worst videos, to be honest. But this is one of the best videos we've done so far in terms of engagement and views and everything. I've been working on something that I like to call Daily Rare that I'm building up. But the idea is to just talk about something related to sneakers and fashion every day, 5 days a week. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but one day a week, I do want to sort of bring people into New York with me. And again, I just had the idea, well, I go to these stores a lot. A lot of people don't get to see these ever. I don't really even show that much, but the feedback was amazing on them.
Yeah. You know, looking at this, it does remind me of some of the other videos that you have in which it's like what Leo wanted to do with Twit, just kind of a day in the life type thing. This is you filling your passion, filming it all, and then giving it to people. And evidently there's a crowd for this. There's enough of an audience that it makes the content popular. Oh, wait, hold on. Is that your shoe closet?
That is, my shoe closet is not that nice looking. That is Kith, New York City, one of my favorite stores. And it's just a really nice shop to get. A lot of these places are a lot of these shoes rather are hard to find. It's hard to get them all in one shop. Kith is a shop where everybody's very pleasant to deal with, and they usually have a lot of good selection there. The owner, Ronnie Feig, is in his own right an amazing men's designer. He does a lot of shoe collaborations that people go crazy over. So I like them because they're a nice shop. A lot of times you go to these shops and people are they have a bad attitude, but here they're always very nice and accommodating. So it makes me want to go back there a lot.
All right. Well, Joe, what do you say that we take a look at a couple of tech stories?
Sure, let's do it.
Let me exercise that part of your brain that's been taken over by shoes and fashion. But I know you still got it because I've seen some of your stories, and yeah, you've got insight into the industry. This first one is something that actually should strike close to you because you're one of the few. You live in one of the few markets that actually has access to Aereo. We found out that in a Supreme Court filing, the DOJ has backed broadcasters in their fight against Aereo. Now, for those people who don't know, Aereo is that company that rents antennas. So they're not selling you a stream. They're selling you space where they put one of these dime-sized antennas you have access to, and which you can stream your video from. You can stream basically a TV tuner on the air. Now, the interesting thing about this is it's brought up all sorts of interesting legal morass about whether or not this is legal. Because what are you doing? Are you streaming the content? Are you buying the content from Aereo? Are they rebroadcasting? Or, as they say, are they just giving you an antenna that you can do anything you want with? Now, in the decision, the Supreme Court argued that they're not against services that legally stream you content, but what they've argued, and this is the confusing part, is that what Aereo is doing is it is replacing the traditional cable service, which would normally be the first actor, the one who receives the content and redistributes it. And that is against the law. Now, this is incredibly shaky, and we have no idea if this is actually a valid judgment, even though it comes from the Supreme Court, because it seems to have a fundamental misunderstanding of what Aereo is trying to do. Now, let me actually read from this decision, because I think it's worth noting. A decision rejecting Aereo's infringing business model and reversing the judgment below need not call into question the legitimacy of innovative technologies that allow consumers to use the internet to store, hear, and view their own lawfully acquired copies of copyrighted works. Indeed, reversal of the judgment below need not threaten the legality of cloud computing. They take the view that cloud computing services offer consumers a chance to remotely store and stream copies that they've already legally acquired. Aereo service doesn't pass muster because it is allowing consumers to gain access to copyrighted content in the first instance. This is so strange to me, because it seems, again, like the law really doesn't understand what's going on. Either that, or techies just want this so much that they're ignoring law. What do you think, Joe? What's your take?
This is something that would come up a lot, and it's not something that I'm totally versed in, but it's definitely a story that I've had to follow lightly over the year, along with, let's say, hundreds, if not thousands of other ones. Every time I see something like this, it makes me frustrated, because it really seems like the people that are arguing over this always sort of don't have an exact idea of what's going on and aren't keeping up with technology. That's the simplest way I could put it. I don't really have anything more to say on it than that. It's extremely frustrating.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're, oh, I'm sorry. It's like you're arguing with a brick wall. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Again, the interesting thing was they took great pains. They said it at least 6 times in the decision that this decision does not affect content providers who legally stream content. They don't want to take out Hulu. They don't want to take out Netflix. They don't want to take out Amazon. They don't want to tell Comcast that they can't stream. So they want to encourage the streaming business, but somehow they think Aereo is a different kind of business, because they, quote unquote, take the place of the first actor, typically the first instance, which would be your cable provider. But what a lot of people are trying to fathom is, why should it be legal that I have my antenna and I put my antenna on the roof and plug it into my computer? That's perfectly legal. I can do that if I want, but I can't rent an antenna from somebody else and just transmit data over the internet like I would any other web page. I think this is one of these decisions that's going to hang over us for a long time, because even though they made pains to say it's not going to affect any other streaming, I know it will. One of the very obvious examples is Slingbox. If the justices can use this as a reason not to allow Aereo to operate, how in the world will Slingbox be allowed to operate? And in fact, there's already been a ruling that says what Slingbox does. Place shifting is perfectly fine. Well, if Slingbox can place shift, why can't Aereo? I don't know. I'm not a legal expert, but again, it's one of the things that keeps me up at night. Now, Joe, I promised you that for every tech story, we were going to have a fashion story, so you could at least teach me a little bit about what it means to have great passion for fashion. So you think we can do that?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's do that. So we've got this. I can't decipher this. So tell me what I'm looking at here.
Okay, so you are looking at a capsule collection from Supreme. This is the one that dropped this week. Supreme does these not exactly every week, but once every week or every other week on Monday, they'll say, okay, this week we're going to drop this capsule collection. And so this time they did one with Comme des Garçons, who is, let's just call it like a high-end menswear kind of streetwear brand. They're known, this is specifically the shirt line. They're known for making, as you can guess, interesting dress shirts. They usually use some patterns that you wouldn't expect. So on this collaboration, they've used polka dots and pinstripes, but they'll do it on one piece. A lot of times you'll see patterns that kind of shouldn't go together on the shirt stuff, but the way they do it, it works. Like this jacket's a perfect example. This shouldn't work, but for some reason it kind of does. But Supreme has a history of doing collaborations with them, but this time they did it a little bit more interesting by paying homage to Harold Hunter, who was a very well-known skateboarder, died a few years back from a, I may have this wrong, but I'm almost positive it was a drug overdose of some sort. And so after that, there was a foundation started in his name to help out youth skateboarders and get them support for skating, make sure they're on the right track in life, just a general good vibes thing for skateboarders. So Supreme decided to take this iconic photo of him as a kid, throw it on some stuff with CDG, and as well donate, not proceeds. They just said they made a donation to that foundation. So that was a little bit interesting for them to do. So this stuff is basically the hot item of this week, at least until tomorrow when Nike does their releases. So you've got a little bit of an assortment of some stuff here. I have one piece in that I can show you. If you go, that hoodie, I have that in right now. It's really cool just to have these, the way they do this stuff is just crazy, but kids will line down the block on Thursdays when they drop this for the store. And when you try to buy any of this online, it usually sells out within seconds, the stuff that people really, really want. So it can be very tricky to get. And a lot of people actually resort to some other methods to pick this stuff up, which we can discuss maybe a little later. But
now, Joe, before we go over that, I want to quash something really quickly. So we're getting something in the chat room right now, and I get it. I understand it. There's a lot of people who are saying, whoa, I'm going to pay, how much am I going to pay for a T-shirt?
Yeah,
this is all hipster wear. And I get it, you know, because I kind of am of the same mind. I don't spend a lot of money on my fashion. In fact, all my quote unquote fashion is typically stuff that just I find, stuff that I get, it fits me, so I buy it. And I can be a snob about people who care about fashion. But here's the thing: how much money have I spent on my gear? How much money do I spend on my computer? How much money do I spend on producing content? Everybody has something that they're willing to pay what many others would consider a ridiculous amount of money for because they're passionate about that. What would you say to someone who comes up to you and says, oh, well, a hoodie? Well, what is this? How much is this going to cost me? Why am I going to spend anything on this fashion?
Right. So it's all about, like you said, what you're willing to place your bets on, put your money down on. This stuff is definitely, some of it can be very expensive. Some of it, CDG itself is a very expensive brand. So Supreme has a tendency to just sort of slap their logo on things, literally. Like they did a Jam Box this year, the Jam Box Mini, and their version is $30 more than the normal. Rather, was it the Big Jam Box? Excuse me. Theirs is $30 more than the normal Big Jam Box. It's just a red Big Jam Box with the Supreme logo, which is just white Supreme on red, as you saw earlier. But you can get a custom Jam Box for $300 from Jam Box. So there's sort of, when you're in the street, there's almost this clout around having that brand. And it's stupid in a way, but it sort of speaks to like, it sort of calls out to other people, I'm hip. If you care about this, I really don't. I just really like this shirt that I'm wearing is from Supreme. I really like the designs. So, but they do have some of those things like on my phone, on my iPhone, I just have this is an in-case case. All they did was throw their logo and make it look like it was a diamond thing, and this jacked up the price with a nice color on it. So to justify it, there really is no justification, but everybody kind of has what they will spend their cash on. So for me, it was definitely cameras at one point. Now it's fashion. I don't know what the next thing will be. I've definitely probably spent more on fashion and sneakers than anything else, but I will say that there is definitely a line for me, and you have to pick your limits. Yep. So I do have like a cash limit that I will pay for anything, and I do have sort of some things that I see just don't make sense to me. And if we're going there, like my usual, which is still crazy high, my limit for anything is usually around $250, because I feel like once you get higher than that amount, you're usually not getting much more than a brand name or some crazy material. As far as Supreme goes, they make very high quality stuff, and if it wasn't, I wouldn't be picking it up. The hoodies are made in Canada. Some of their stuff is made in the U.S., and the quality is always very, very high. And on top of that, you're getting something that's not a lot of people are going to have. A lot of times with interesting heritage, Supreme will pull out of the archives things that, as one of the guys I know at Kith, shout outs to Julian, he put it best to me one day. They'll pick up something from like 10 or 20 years ago that maybe wasn't so cool at the time and say, let's bring it back and do this to it, because and we're going to say it's cool now. And when they do it, it usually is kind of cool. So it's not for everyone. It isn't. And there's definitely there's an attitude around streetwear, and I don't like the attitude. So I'll put it this way. While I like Supreme, I don't like the way they treat you in the store.
There you go.
But when you have to deal with a lot of people trying to buy a limited amount of stuff, it's really, I can understand why the guys at the store aren't necessarily going to be totally nice to you. If you want more info on Supreme specifically, though, there was a great profile in the New York Times at the end of 2012 that really goes into how they came up. They just started as a skateboard shop in '94, true to the roots, and people really started grasping toward it. And now I almost feel like there's this bubble now with sneakers and menswear and streetwear. It's probably going to burst in a little bit the same way the tech stuff did a few years ago. At least I think so. So we'll see how that ends up happening. But yeah, there's real no justification. You just kind of, it's emotional. You get really emotional about these things and you want to just have them. Doesn't make sense, but you end up justifying the price in your head because you want it.
Oh, I could, say the same thing about Apple. Well, I could say the same thing about my brother's a gun nut. Now, okay, I know that the people in the chat room, the members of the Twit army, they're going to make fun of this. Of course they're going to make fun of this. Of course. We all make fun of stuff that we don't understand. And to be honest with you, Joe, of course I'm always going to be honest with you, but to be honest, because I like to make a point, I don't really understand it. I would never pay that much for clothes. But here's the thing. I understand why someone would. Because it's not about me. When you buy something with your money, it has absolutely nothing to do with what I see value in that. It has to do with what it does for you, with what it makes you feel, with what you want to use your hard-earned resources on. And so in that sense, I mean, I just see you as a geek. And that's why I invited you on the show, because you were geeking out over something that you were obviously passionate about. I mean, on my Twitter feed, sometimes there's 12 tweets in a row from you, because you just got something and you're so excited and you're bursting with energy, that I wanted to figure out what it was. And I think I can. I think I can look at what you've got in front of me, what you suggested we look at, and I see why this would make you excited.
There's a lot, there's a lot of thought. I mean, well, now we kind of know, but there's always a lot of thought. On the flip side, though, there are a lot of people now doing what they call streetwear brands. And we like to joke around, we call them like big cartel CEOs, because a lot of kids now are just, they put a logo on a shirt and and there's nothing really going on there. I really enjoy when companies really sort of take a concept and roll with it. It started for me with Vans back in the day. They started a line called Vault. And the thing with Vans was that their shoes were always good, but they started using higher end materials and making it limited, working with designers, but the shoes weren't that much more at the time. Then this was well after Supreme had established itself as a brand. This was around the early 2000s for Vans, but that's what got me into it. And I sort of started appreciating, like, wow, you can get stuff with like better materials, and the shoes might be more, at least in the Vans case, they were using better insoles, which was kind of the big thing for me because they're more comfortable to walk in. But you kind of slowly get into it and this happens. But there's also a great sense of community, and I honestly don't see that same community in the tech world. And that's sort of what really got me about it. People really treat each other. It's stupid. It's about sneakers and clothing, but we really do look out for each other, whether it's on limited releases or whatever it is. And it's almost like you're treating it like family, which is silly, but there's always this big overall lesson of how to treat people. As thirsty as you are for a product and you want to like get it for yourself, you see so many people trying to help each other out to get it. And throwing each other, hey, I got this size, who wants it for retail, so that you don't have to buy it from a reseller for too much money. And at the same time, there are like the nasty trolls, but I never saw anything like that in the tech world. I still don't. I see everybody arguing in tech in the comment sections or on Twitter. Yeah, and I like to argue too. So I mean, I got glass on, right? Like I'm in the middle almost, but it's that family sense that really almost like sucked me in a little bit.
Joe, I don't get it. I don't understand it, but you know what? I see you geeking out. I see the passion. I got nothing but respect for that, man. And I understand. And this is why I have you on my Twitter feed, because I don't want to know people who just have the same interests as me. I want to know people who have different interests. So maybe I can widen my horizons. Maybe I can understand something that other people are excited about. It's just one of the things that makes us geeks. But before we get too much in trouble with our audience, how about this? Why don't we go to a topic that we can all make fun of? Lawyers. Yeah. Okay, so we've got this story about how Chrysler has ordered the South Puget Sound Community College to crush a prototype Dodge Viper GTS coupe that was donated to the school. Now look at this thing. Now seriously, look at this thing. I remember when these first came out, and they're gorgeous vehicles. I mean, I love good engineering, and this was just designed as a monster from the ground up. Now, imagine this. These aren't just regular cars. These were prototypes. These were pre-production. These are GTS coupes that have 600 horsepower 8-liter V10 monsters with no ABS, no traction control, with a super light fiberglass body. I mean, these things could scream. They basically designed something that would test the limits of that engineering set. They wanted to see if they could break it, and they definitely made something that could do it. Now, when they released the GTS, the actual production version, it came with a heavier body. It came with 450 horsepower instead of 600, and it came with all the safety features. So again, these are a special memento, a special moment in time in the development of the GTS series. They've ordered them crushed because when they gave them to these schools, they gave them to technical schools, thinking that they would be used to assemble and disassemble so people understand how to work on high-end cars. The batch of 92 pre-production cars were to only be used for that. They were never to be driven. And it seems as if a couple of students drove a few of the ones that were given to their campuses. They got into a couple of accidents. And, of course, there were a couple of lawsuits. Well, now Chrysler has sent out messages to all owners of the 92 super special, ultra pristine, like VIN number 1234 GTS Vipers, saying, crush them, destroy them. Now, let me get your input on this.
It's so upsetting.
It's upsetting, right? Because it's something that's beautiful. And this is a crossover. This is something that's beautiful. It's fashionable, kind of your world, and it's engineering craziness, which is kind of my world. And it looks like we should make fun of the lawyers. Oh, it's the freaking lawyers, or it's freaking Chrysler, and they're blah, 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 blah. But doesn't Chrysler have a right to be worried? I mean, if someone got into an accident with a car that they told them not to drive, that they gave away out of the goodness of their corporate heart to these technical schools, can't they now turn around and say, well, we tried, you couldn't do it, destroy the cars?
I don't know what the exact contract is. I do know that article brought up an interesting point that these types of cars are traditionally called crushers to begin with. So the end of the article was saying that it's meeting the fate that it probably should be meeting anyway. But to me, it's that, so one or two people screwed up and now everyone has to pay the price. People are going to do stupid things. That doesn't mean, I just feel it seems like a real shame because it's just, yeah.
No, I was just thinking about that. That's absolutely what people would say. Wait a minute. We were fine in our location. We never drove the cars. We never destroyed anything. We never sued Chrysler. Why do you have to destroy our prototype? But at the same time, I mean, if someone gets into an accident and if Chrysler does nothing about it, they are now open to a huge liability. And that's just kind of sad, isn't it?
Well, are they open to the liability? That's what I wasn't understanding from that article exactly.
Absolutely they are, because these cars are pre-production. Like I said, way more horsepower than they should have, way less body weight than they should have, and no traction controls, no safety whatsoever. In fact, the bodies...
not street legal.
They're not street legal. They look street legal, but they're not street legal. I mean, they're basically an engine and transmission and wheels with a fiberglass body. That's what these things are. But, you know, someone took advantage of their generosity, and now all 92 locations are going to lose them.
Just seems like it's not as much. I almost want to just say, like, I feel like this isn't Chrysler's fault. You know what I mean? It's just, it stinks.
Yeah. But see, this is what kills me. When I see something like this, and I can argue from the side of Chrysler, I understand what they're doing. I understand why they're doing it. It makes it so that I can't see them as an evil corporation. I want to see them as an evil corporation. You know, I want to see the fact that that GM crushed all the EV1s makes them an evil corporation. I want to make the fact that Mazda destroyed all those. I can't remember. They had a street legal car that was just an incredible rally car. It was on an overturned shipping Maersk ship, and they hadn't been damaged or anything, but because it was on that ship, they had them all destroyed, even though they were a limited run. Those kinds of things sound like a waste, but in the world that we live in, that's really all a responsible company can do, right? I mean, let me ask you this. Is it our fault? We're so quick to sue. We are so quick to jump over to the lawyer and say, this is your fault, this is your responsibility, you owe me money, that these companies are gun shy. They don't want to do any of this anymore.
I just think instead of scrapping the cars, it would make more sense to make it a lot, let's just say, security around these cars a lot tighter if you're going to do it. Like, I just don't see the point of just trashing these. You're ruining a good educational experience for a lot of people that are trying to get into that trade, and these are completely useful tools for that, but they're just going to be scrapped because someone was stupid enough to get into an accident with one when they knew they shouldn't be driving it.
Yeah, I know. It's sad. It's sad. Oh, you know what? You know what we should do? Let's get away from the sadness. Let's get away from the destruction of fine art and fine engineering and talk about our obsessions. Are you ready for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to start off. If you've been watching the stream at all this week, you know that I've been kind of going gaga over a little thing called Titanfall. Yeah, Brian and I have been playing a whole lot of this. And, well, it's taken up all my time. Let me just do a little bit of gameplay here. So this was from a session that we recorded, I believe, on Wednesday. This game single-handedly almost destroyed Know-How and Coding 101. We played this game so much, we spent so much time with it, that we almost didn't prep enough for the shows. Now, it's a simple first-person shooter. It's built on the Source engine, so if you've ever played Portal or Half-Life or Team Fortress, it's the same basic engine. It's a 10-year-old engine, but this game looks incredible. We're playing on an Acer AG3. It's a Predator, a gaming machine, but the graphics are smooth, and the eye candy is incredible. And just the mechanics of the game are really, really good. You spend half your time as a pilot running around on foot, and then half of your time as a pilot inside one of these Titans, these big mechs with machine guns and crushing power and phenomenal destructive force. Now, what is so addictive about this game is the split perspective, the ability to play as two different types of combatants on the field. It just lends itself to all sorts of different strategies. And I think that's something that gamers really like. They like the ability to play with strategy. Now, I don't know how much more time we're going to spend on Titanfall. Hopefully it's not a whole lot, but yeah, it's pulled away a lot of my life. That's my current obsession. Joe, what about you?
On Titanfall?
No, what about your obsession?
So I've been waiting to pick that up, but I got a sneaker release.
You don't have Titanfall yet.
I've got my Xbox One sitting here, but I don't have. It's that balance. I have the balance going toward a pair of sneakers right now. Now if I miss out on the sneakers tomorrow,
then Titanfall
and all the craziness,
got it.
Then Titanfall.
I got it.
But
okay.
if not, I'll have to wait a little longer. But no, for me, it's been on the tech end anyway. It's really been Google Glass. It's been really interesting to use, and not so much for the tech thing, but just for the social aspect, seeing how people react to it, and sort of trying to make it not be a glass hole type of
Thank
thing,
you.
Which has been interesting. And I will say that I have the RX frames on these. That has been a big help in having people not notice them as much and being a lot more comfortable around them. You definitely don't look like as much of a cyborg anymore. That normal headband that comes with them just covers your eyebrows, and you can't see you can't like make out people's emotions fully. And it's like when they have clown makeup on almost. I understand why it freaks people out. So glass is just, it's crazy. It's interesting to see what these companies are trying to do with wearables right now and how it may impact things in a few years.
Yeah, we've had glass here since the beginning. Jason Howell has our pair. And actually, I believe I was glass reservation, was it like 108 or 118? 118. So I was the 118th person to sign up for Google Glass. I even have my little glass plaque that tells me that was my place. It's an incredible technology. It really is. The thing that makes people balk is the $1,600 price tag. I mean, it kills it for most people when they think of how much money they're going to spend on something that isn't really a pair of glasses, is kind of difficult, kind of fragile, and not really sure what they're going to do with it yet. I mean, obviously, you figured out a really good use for them. You film your walks around New York. You film your videos for your YouTube channel. But if you weren't doing that, would you still use glass?
I'll be honest, I don't recommend it right now, and I definitely have a media use for it. It's an interesting angle that's, honestly, let's just be realistic, it's loaded with SEO. You're hitting like limited sneakers that people are looking for, limited fashion that's hyped up, and then this tech thing that like no one in that segment's really using, and it's still hyped up. It's just SEO gold. I mean, I'm just being realistic with you. So as a content creator, I love what I can maybe do with it, even if it's nothing more than strapping a GoPro to your face, but there's still something different about it. And then also the geek in me is like, oh, wow, I'm getting to test out this early technology and see what's going on. The interesting thing with glass for me has been that we have to remember it's still not a consumer product. So when you're paying $1,600, you're getting something that is very much let's call it, it's not exactly pre-production, but they're not full on. There can only be, I would imagine, only tens of thousands of units, if that much right now. And when you're paying that price, you really are getting a one-to-one sort of service with Google. And they have I got this at version 2. They have updated people that have version 1 to version 2. That's not really in the fine print, but I would hope they do stuff like that in the future. But the interesting thing is just those few times where you get to do things on this and you don't have to do them on your phone, and it's just so much more quick and intuitive. It really gets you thinking like, wow, what does this mean? Those times are they're few and far between, but whenever they happen, it's crazy to just be able to tap it and go, okay, glass, get directions to here. That's something that is a lot more involved. I mean, it's a first world solution to a first world problem, but when you get to do that, it's like, wow, there's something. Looking at my phone's glass screen and tapping, that is not going to make sense after a while. It's really it gets in the way sometimes. Like you sort of start feeling it now,
you do get the sense.
Yeah.
Playing with glass for a while, you get the sense of, it's expensive right now. It doesn't always work exactly the way I want, but you could see a time when you're right. The screen on your phone, actually looking at it is going to seem so archaic. It's going to be, wait, what did you just do? Hey, wait, why did you take your phone out of your pocket? I don't understand that. And that's exciting.
I really love when there's one thing that I really like that I can't wait to see it more fleshed out, because effectively, aside from the few glassers out there, it's really up to developers, but you're basically running effectively a Galaxy Nexus. That's what's internally in here for the most part. And you're basically seeing Google Now for the most part in your eye. But there are those applications that do things. And one that I love that pops up when you're walking around, it sort of gauges your interest and will say, hey, there's a cafe here. Here's reviews around, or here's something in the area that might be cool to you. And it's not really fine-tuned on a micro level. But when you think about the future of that, when maybe Google, if you're comfortable letting your information out like that, what it could really tell you, like when I'm walking by a shoe store, maybe I could walk by and it knows that I'm looking for one pair of shoes and I'm a size 12, right? So wouldn't it be cool if in the future the store has it linked up to this central system where I simply walk by the store and it'll ping me a man and go, hey, you were looking for this shoe. Guess what? This store has it in stock. Here's your size in my eye. And we can apply it to so many things, but that's the potential I see here, whether it's on this or on a smartwatch, which is definitely more socially acceptable. There's obviously a lot of hurdles because you're sharing information. There's a camera on this that freaks people out. There's a lot of things that we're going to have to be comfortable with. But if we are comfortable with those things, it opens up a lot of doors. And it's not to say you can't do that on your phone, but you don't have to think about it when it's just on you, and it'll just pop up on the corner of your eye.
It's a brave new world. Thanks, Joe. How about this? Why don't we do some tech?
Sure.
Now, we've got a little something. Anyone who watched Before You Buy saw me show off a new docking station that I'm using for my laptops. I use Acer S7s, which I really love, but I don't like the fact that there's only 2 USB 3.0 ports. I don't like the fact that it's really difficult to get it hooked up as a desktop. So I thought this might make for a good piece of tech. Do you spend a lot of time finding ways to connect your various peripherals and cables into your laptop or Ultrabook? Well, if you do, pay attention, because we've got the Startech Universal USB 3.0 Laptop Dock. The Startech USB 3S Dock HD is a universal docking station designed for those with USB 3.0 equipped laptops. Measuring 7.7 inches long, 2.8 inches high, 4.9 inches wide, and weighing less than 13 ounces, the Startech dock is well sized for even the slimmest of notebooks. It requires an i3 CPU with 2 GB of memory or better, and is compatible with Windows XP and above, as well as Mac OS 10.6 and up. Combining a DisplayLink 3900 video chipset with a Realtek 8211E Ethernet adapter and a VLI 810 USB interface, the dock gives you dual displays, gigabit Ethernet, full audio, and a powered USB 3.0 hub, all in a single package. On the back of the dock, you'll find connectors for DVI, HDMI, and VGA video, a single gigabit Ethernet port, 3.5mm jacks for speakers and microphone, and 2 USB 3.0 ports. On the right side of the unit, Startech added a third USB 3.0 port, while the left side has a Kensington lock port, the USB uplink, and a jack for 5-volt power. You can use 2 of the video connectors at a time, either HDMI and DVI or HDMI and VGA, but not VGA and DVI, with a maximum resolution of 2048 by 1152 per screen. Using the dock is simple. Connect all the peripherals that you intend to use, power the dock, then connect the single USB 3.0 uplink into a USB 3.0 port on your notebook. You'll automatically get a display link pop-up that will install the drivers necessary to use the onboard video device. I was up and running in less than 90 seconds. Performance of the unit is impressive, thanks to the 5 gigabit per second transfer rate of the USB 3.0 bus. I was able to drive all 3 screens at 1080p resolution with no discernible lag, pixelization, or artifacting. I tried to stress the dock by pulling 3 HD streams from the network over the dock's gigabit Ethernet adapter while simultaneously displaying them on the monitors. But again, I had perfect display of all content, even as I ran them in the background while pulling data off a USB 3.0 hard drive. I did notice that by copying data from the USB hard drive to the network drive while simultaneously pulling 3 HD streams and pushing them out to the monitors, the CPU utilization would rise towards 90%. But that was just 3 points above where it would be, using a separate USB Ethernet adapter and the onboard HDMI port to drive just 2 monitors. The Startech USB 3S Dock HD is available now with a 2-year standard warranty. You can find it online for about $120.
I've been using
There's
this
a lot
thing.
to like about the Startech USB 3.0 Universal Laptop Dock. It's the right size, the right weight. It's compact, and yet it has all the ports that you need to connect all your peripherals. I also really like the performance. I tried to stress this a lot. I ran plenty of video. I used up a lot of data transfer devices over the bus trying to make it die, and it just wouldn't. It's got the bandwidth, the performance that you need to do high-quality video applications over that single USB 3.0 bus. I also like the price. At $120, it sounds like maybe it might be a bit too expensive, but consider all the individual components that goes into the Startech dock. You've got the dual link display link adapter, you've got the gigabit Ethernet adapter, the USB audio, and the USB powered hub. It's pretty much a wash in price, except this is a single unit, which means that I can have my nice little tower with a real docking station that has my laptop, my keyboard, my mouse, my USB, my sound device, and all my monitors in one little docking station. I like that. On the con side, I'd say the only negative I can think of is that it doesn't have more USB ports, specifically USB 2.0 ports. Yes, I like that it has 3 high-speed USB 3.0 ports, but you're going to use those up really quickly. I mean, 1 with mouse, 1 with keyboard, and then you have 1 remaining for something else. I would like to have had 2 to 4 USB 2.0 ports so I could plug my mouse, my keyboard, maybe my phone into those, and then reserve the high-speed ports for those hard drives or any applications that require a lot of transfer speed. Still, this is a really good dock. This is the solution that you want if you want that single point of connection between your laptop and your home system. If you're looking for a docking station, then I'd say that the Startech USB 3.0 Universal Laptop Dock is a definite buy. I'm Father Robert Ballaser with Before You Buy.
Padre, sorry about stepping on you there. I thought the review was over. I forgot to look down at the timer. And now, and actually, Red Penguin in the chat room, SS does stand for super speed, which is what we call USB 3. This thing is really, really good. Believe it or not, I actually carry one with me. I've got one for my desk at home, so when I plug in my S7, I've got all my monitors, and I carry one with me on the road so that I have everything. I've got my hub, I've got my way to hook up to my hotel television, I've got my audio card. It's really, really light, and believe it or not, this is nicer than carrying around all the individual adapters. It's just one of those things that I kind of geek out to. Now, something else that was mentioned in the chat room was, can I plug in all my peripherals? Well, I mentioned that towards the end. The USB 3.0 bus can handle up to 5 gigabits per second. So even with dual monitors, even with gigabit Ethernet, there's not a whole lot you can do to max that thing out, unless you've got several hard drives that you're all pulling from at the same time. So it's going to be a good device if you've got a USB 3.0 laptop or even desktop. Trent, I want to thank you, a.k.a. Trent, for coming on to the show. I know it's kind of daunting because
you are a tech person, but your passion is in fashion. And tech people aren't known for being so, let's just say, courteous to people in fashion. Thank you again for being willing to come on the Padres Corner.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's you should see, I've considered making dual Twitters numerous times for that reason.
Hey, I know exactly how you feel, because I think about doing that for the faith/technology part. But you know what? It's all you, and it's all passion, it's all geek. Why wouldn't you keep it in the same account? Yeah.
Well, once the verification kind of made it like, oh, great, now I can't make a second account.
Like, no,
we got to get you in on that.
I know. Well, so I already figured out. We know how to do it. We know how to game it. All you have to do is you have to get a lot of people, perhaps all the people in the chat room, to create Twitter accounts that are close to PadreSJ, like, make PadreSJ or PaSJ. And if they see enough of those, they're going to figure out which one was the original account, and they verify it. But I don't want to do that. I want to be the first person to get to 1.5 million followers without getting verified. That's going to be awesome. But before we let you go, here's your 60 seconds. Talk about whatever you want. Tell them to go wherever you want them to go. This is your moment to reach out to the Twit audience and tell them where they can find more of AKA Trent.
Awesome. So if you want to catch my ramblings, it's at AKA Trent on Twitter and Instagram. I do talk a lot about tech and streetwear and sneakers, so there's a big mix. I'm really into headphones. So if you like headphones and you're not into this whole fashion thing, that's one good reason, I think, to follow me. I'll be doing a lot of headphone reviews on my channel again very soon. If you're interested in checking out the whole fashion thing, then come take a look. It's veryraremag.com or just youtube.com/AKTrent. I make daily videos just talking about the scene from my desk over here, and I do some editorial videos showing how outfits look when you're wearing them. So it's an interesting look if you're trying to see what this stuff looks like on real people and not just models, or get something a little bit more involved than someone in their bedroom going, hey, here's what I picked up from my favorite store. So I'm hoping that somebody enjoys it. And of course, there's some glass content. So if you've been curious to find out more about glass, maybe you can come follow me for that. I don't know. But if you want to, there you go. That's my pitch.
AKA Trent. Guys, seriously, follow him. Find him on YouTube. Look for him on Instagram. He's a good man. He makes a lot of really, really interesting content. And as you've seen in this show, he knows what it means to be a geek. And ain't that just cool?
Uber geeks.
Joe, thank you so very much. I'm gonna let you go. But before I let the chat room go, I want to remind you that you can find me on the Twit TV network pretty much the entire week. On Mondays, you can find me at 2:30 on This Week in Enterprise Tech. I talk about networking. I talk about data centers. I talk about all the things that IT geeks need to talk about. On Thursdays, you can find me both at 12:30 and 1:30 on Know How, which is our maker/DIY show, and Coding 101. By the way, next week, if you watch our show, which for Coding 101, which we recorded today, you'll see our interview with Liam Kennedy, who is the creator of the ISS Above. This is this wonderful Raspberry Pi project that uses some interesting programming, a lot of math, and more than a little bit of geek savvy to give you an indication when you can look for the International Space Station above you. Very cool guy, very cool product. You're going to want to watch it. Trust me. You can also watch me here Fridays at Padres Corner, 7 o'clock. Just don't tell Lisa or Leo. They were kind enough to let me do it, but you know what? I don't want to push my luck. And, of course, you can find me just in the chat room. Go to irc.twit.tv. You'll see me hanging out. Say hi. I'm really friendly. I very rarely bite. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. You can find me at, twitter.com/PadreSJ. I normally reply to everyone that writes to me, and I try to get everyone who jumps into my Google Plus account as well. And as long as you're going to find me there, find me on my YouTube page at, suddenly the TriCaster's going crazy, at youtube.com/PadreSJ. And once again, I will try to get back to you when I can. Till the next time, I'm Father Robert Ballecer, and this has been Padres Corner.